Parents found out I'm well off after my brother hired a private investigator, and now they are treating me like I'm their golden child. I am the middle child of a family of 3 siblings that grew up in a small town. My father is a hardworking, but emotionally inaccessible man who is looking at retiring soon. My mother is a kowtowing housewife from a traditional conservative and religious background. They raised me, and I love them, but they have always considered me a disappointment. My older brother is the golden child. He's 40, married to a completely vapid and quiet woman. They have 2 boys, both into sports, punching, and I think they are complete brats. My brother's job has been mainly selling cars, and he works at a dealership nearby. He went to college, got an MBA, all paid for by my parents. As a kid, he was very abusive towards me, and got away with it for the most part. As an adult, he took on this "I am a mentor to the handicapped" attitude around me, like I am mentally deficient, and should be grateful to his charity towards me. Most of his advice is just abuse in another form or a chance to boast about his cars, big house, trophy wife, 2 athletic kids, powerboat, ATVs, and all that. I was the kid who cried too much and made excuses. To be fair, I didn't do that well in school. I was bullied, picked on, and made fun of because I wasn't a huge redneck jock like most kids in this town. I have asthma, which my parents don't believe is a real thing, suffered depression since I can remember, and was never able to run in a straight line, much less toss around a football. My parents were always expressing their frustration and why I was never as smart or outgoing as my brother. I graduated school with a disappointing 2.5 GPA, used my own money to go to college, but dropped out on the 2nd year. This was always brought up to me in conversation. My little sister was a golden princess. I don't have much to say about her because I moved out of the house when she became a teenager. So, I feel like most of my feelings about her come from an adult point of view. She's not a bad person, just a little spoiled. She engages with the abuses my parents and brother use on me, but it's mostly parroting, I think, to avoid being the low one on the totem pole. She married at 19, had a grand wedding, and has 3 kids of her own. The only one I like is her middle child, and I am sure it's projected sympathy, because she reminds me of what it was like to be the middle child, and she is always getting picked on. I was always an antisocial and awkward nerd. After I dropped out of college, I worked at a gaming and comic book store, which has been out of business for over 7 years, but my parents kept using it in present tense. While there, I met a fellow geek who was looking to start a tech business, and he and I started a support business that grew and grew. Eventually, he sold the company to a bigger company that had to buy me out. They did so with cash and stock, and then their stock did really well. During this time, I invested or created some extra business interests, with a lot of them being lucrative. Without getting too much into it, I am currently worth 7 figures of assets and currently work as a CTO of another private startup. But I don't live extravagantly because I don't need to. I drive a 15-year-old Saturn, live in a 2-bedroom house, albeit in a nice neighborhood, and all my furniture is second-hand. I am still single, see a therapist, and I am busy most of the time. I have to fight alcoholism, which my parents do not support whatsoever, because they think that it's all in my head like the asthma and depression. My parents expect me to be at dinner every Sunday, but they live at the other end of the state, a 90 to 120 minute drive each way. And that takes up most of my Sunday, half my weekend. But they just assume as a single mental case, as my brother calls me. Openly, I don't have anything better to do. For 3 hours, I had to endure everything from coerced praise of my brother's latest big sale to being told advice on how to live my life, grow up, get married, and be an adult for once. If I skip a dinner, I'll hear about its next dinner. My parents haven't said I am a moocher per se, but it's implied, which always puzzles me. In fact, I never have a good answer for my therapist as to why I still kept going, because any success I have had is belittled or redefined in some negative light. I haven't exactly shared my life with anyone back home. Until very recently, everyone still thought I worked in that gaming store. My life of retail sluggishness was compared to the outgoing and go-getter lifestyle of my brother, who had a real job like a grown-up. Games and comics were kid stuff. Anytime I mention technology of any kid, my brother talks over me like I haven't a clue, and I have long since learned to just let him. It's very obvious that he's full of shit, but I feared calling him out because then I'd have to explain how I know that, and then I'd have to explain how what I do, and I guess I was afraid they'd belittle that and it would affect everything. I am a hot mess. Last month, however, it changed because my brother got hold of some of my personal data from mom and dad. He hired some private investigator company to give them a report on me as a person under the pretense it was an employer background check. My guess is that they were going to have an intervention of some sort. But what they found shocked them. They found my net worth. Where I lived was not exactly a room in some shanty, and some other things I wanted to keep private. Because I deal in security, I got alerts of some unauthorized credit pulls, and long story short, I figured out what had happened. I was so angry. I hired that same agency to look up their net worth and assets. Needless to say, my brother was living way outside his means, has several arrests for DUI and public drunken conduct over the years, a few domestic disturbance calls, a file with CPS, but no current charges, scheduled IRS back payments, and has 3 mortgage loans on his house. His credit is in the shitter. My parents were modest and had very little outside of what I already knew, boring and actually quite sensible in comparison. I didn't even look up my sister. When I came to dinner, I was looking to burn down some bridges. However, what I came into was even more depressing. My parents treated me completely different. They awkwardly fawned over me like I was always the golden child, and this caused my brother to lose his shit halfway through dinner. He tried to compete with me by possibly making up stories about recent commissions and a promotion, and I merely said that these were good things because of all the IRS tax issues, loans, and overextended credit. He denied all of it. I handed him a copy of my report and said it was he who inadvertently suggested that agency when he pulled mine. I have to confess, that felt good for a few minutes of my life. My parents scolded him with dramatic shock, but it was obvious they were in on it. 2, they had to have given him the social security number. For one, it was sickening and I got no joy over the fight. I felt like I couldn't define the disdain I had for my family until this moment. They were all greedy cowards. The next hour, they threw each other under the bus while I just kept quiet when I could. Sometimes they'd turn to me and I'd give nonchalant single-word answers or shrug a lot. My sister, her husband, my brother's wife, and all 5 kids just sat dumbfounded because nothing like this had ever happened before. Usually, it's pretty quiet and predictable. My mother starts the conversation. My father grunts a lot. My brother boasts a lot. His wife boasts a lot. My brother and sister say what they are up to if they get the chance, and here and there will be some jabs at how I should look up to my brother and be a real man. Now it was my mom and dad and my brother screaming about all this old news, like shit that happened to the family 20-30 years ago, and whose fault it really was. Like everything unraveled in an MMA free-for-all. Every stupid thing I felt about them was validated, and I feel like I should feel happy or have a sense of justice. But frankly, I feel terrible. I don't think I handled it well. I knew they were awful people. What was I hoping to accomplish by dragging my brother's dirty linen out? Now his kids know. For Chris's sake. It ended when my brother, red in the face with fury, blamed me for causing all the problems in this family in one huge summary. You should have never been born. You could tell my mom and dad were trying to shush him in a panic, something I have never seen them do before that night. But they never acknowledged how they treated me before. I got up at some point and told them I was tired of them all, and I wasn't coming back to dinner anymore. Then my parents accused me of withholding from them. They said some niece or nephew had some ailment I could have fixed and turned a blind eye. I was never aware of these things, and no one asked me for help. Frankly, I think they were making it all up on the spot, but I didn't say that. We thought you worked at a comic book store. No, I stopped correcting you 10 years ago. It hasn't been in business since 2011, something I mentioned more than once. Ugh. How these narcissists rewrote history was beyond appalling and straight to embarrassing. I finally just walked out and drove home. I have mixed feelings. I feel kind of violated that now they know how much I am worth. And there is definitely going to be pressure to pay them back because I saw them do this to my brother. I don't want to deal with that. Yes, I am grateful. My mom and dad gave me hot food, fresh water, and my own bed to sleep growing up. Yes, we went to amusement parks every summer. No, I was not beaten by my parents. At least, but I was definitely not their favorite, and I feel like any accomplishment I have had as an adult was done in spite of my upbringing. I grew up with them looking the other way when my brother punched me, kicked me, and verbally abused me. Even if they think verbal abuse is not a real thing, I feel like I am just done. I know they are my family, but I am just so done with them all. I don't want them to die or anything. I just want to completely cut ties with them and close that chapter in my life. Of course, if I get a girlfriend and want to get married and have kids, how am I going to approach that?